NAP Connection is a panel discussion on selected art issues with 3 guests and the host, James Carroll. Home viewers are invited to call and offer comments or questions during the live telecast. NAP Connection is brought to you by the New Arts Program, a nonprofit art service organization in cooperation with Berks Community Television. The New Arts Program is supported in part by the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, local government, area businesses, NAP memberships, and individual contributions. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to NAP Connection. I'm James Carroll, and as my guests, I have Janet Roberts. And Janet is let's go down the list. You're a writer, you're a poet, you're an educationalist. What else?
An editor.
Editor. Okay, and what we're going to be doing tonight, as the other sort of like episodes that we've had over the years with Janet, we've dealt with going to certain places, particularly in Asia Minor areas, and it's always been there as far as location is concerned, and it's always been here and there. Tonight it's going to be there and here, and what we're going to be doing is spending our time with angels, poetry, and Kashmir. Okay, Janet, you can start us off.
We're going to be talking about absence, our empty chair over here, and presence, and the spirit and the cloth this evening. Our first guest is Vera Zubarev, who is known by her pseudonym as Ulia, and I will introduce her books to you because our focus this evening is going to be on books. This is the last, which is by V. Ulia. It's about angels, about God, about poetry. It is the English version, rewritten in English of the Russian version, which was published by Verlag Press in Switzerland and Austria last year. And it meant that the original version, which was in Russian, it was translated into another version of publication of Russian and of German. And the very original version was published in Russia itself. So this is not only the story of there and here, but of what happens when the word goes through transitions, transformations, and translations, and the progression and development of this particular poet, who, as we have focused one of our threads, James, as you recall, has been Anna Akhmatovah's life. We started the program with the fact that I had been in Russia. And Vera Zubarev, our guest this evening, also comes from Odessa, from Russia. And the angels seem to have brought her to America, along with her husband, who works at the Fox Chase Cancer Center, and her son, who has filmed this interview with her and myself that we're going to do this evening. We're going to look at Vera's investigation into angels, which is not about angels, as she says, but about human beings. And I'd like to read you Horst Gergengerk's appraisal of this text and why he recommended that Verlag publish it. I present Ulia to the angelic reader now. Expect a type of wit that never becomes irony, and in a crafty way also remains serious. Vera is not the only one to address angels. This book, and there was a series of books, what was it, 5 years ago or so, that angels flourished in our environment, perhaps because we needed them. And this book came out, Angels on the Arno, which focuses on Eric Lindblom's photographs of angels, but it has a text by an American poet, Linda Paston, who writes the preface and talks about how this draws attention to angels. She includes a little bit of a poem. She says, "I'm tired of angels," I wrote in a poem recently, "of how their great wings rustle open the way a curtain opens on a play I have no wish to see." So angels, to a certain extent in our society, have fallen into that realm of roses, of not being something that we cherish, but that we associate with the antique, with the classical, with the time past. And in that sense, this book by Linda Paston and by Eric Lindblad deals with angels at the Arno in the same way.
More angels within the medieval times.
Yes,
much
of course.
more.
It's preserving the angels which are in the medieval churches and within the classical tradition. And then there's another book, which I had in my collection, by Robert Bly, Angels of Pompeii. And this is a beautiful text in which he has written poems which are not about angels, and they do not feature photographs of angels. They're very abstract, but they evoke the loss of angels. Perhaps the loss of the angelic and the reverence that we have for the loss. I'm trying to see.
Well, the angel becomes the mythical, the element, the shadow.
Yes, there's one, perhaps our camera can catch this, there's one literal angel from Pompeii. Is it possible to catch? There we go.
Yeah.
Which is very beautiful. There they have it.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. Other than that, there's one more, and so forth. So it's wonderful because what this photographer succeeds in doing, here's one more, succeeds in retrieving, we're challenging our team here, retrieving images of angels that have been lost. Now Vera is doing something quite different. She's not looking at antiquity. She's not looking at the classical tradition or the medieval tradition. This is coming out of the Russia tradition, and the book that she's looking at is not the Bible, but the Torah. And she is talking about human beings and how we come to grips with perhaps the loss of angels in the 20th century. I think it would be best if we went and heard from her at this moment. We have an interview at home with her.
The element of her reference to angels, more or less, is more attuned, I think, from what I can get from her back cover there, in referring to Adam and referring to the black and white as opposed to giving it color, almost a Michelangelo type of object quality to it in a way.
Well, Michelangelo would take us probably where Robert Bly and Stephen Breguet are back to a classical tradition. It's up to us to see if she's taking us to a classical place.
The real person would be more of a Da Vinci, which would be the veil quality, the impressionistic quality, the kind of transparent quality.
James, I think you're going to be very surprised.
Well, we're going to have fun.
These angels tend to be clones and robots. And Professor Garrick says, "I leave it to others to debate whether or not Ulia is a religious poet. While God is constantly a topic of discussion, it does not seem to be a God to which one can pray. God stands for the legitimacy of his creation. He is only there as the complete product of his creation, from which Adam emerges into freedom. The angels, some say, are what were left over from God after he gave mankind free will, bodiless plumage mutants of the intelligible." So it's not dark poetry like Anna Akhmatovah, because Vera has come out of a different tradition, and she's lived now 10 years in America. Her mother and her family are all American citizens. Her son has been educated here. She's gotten her PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. She's quite a scholar in her own right. We'll learn more about this in the interview. Her PhD was on a systematic approach to literature, the mythopoetics of Chekov's 4 major plays. And this has been used by the Annenberg in Philadelphia to interpret their productions of Chekov. And she's done a film, which was in the film festival last summer in Philadelphia, called 4 Funny Families, which she'll talk about in the interview. And her most recent book this year is A Concept of Dramatic Genre and the Comedy of a New Type. And the comedy of a new type is what she sees herself doing in Angels. We can decide chess literature and film, because now she's working with her son, who is a filmmaker, and we're going to see his product now.
Well, the film as becoming the transparent quality.
Right. And it's interesting bridging from a poet's language in Russian to English to German, the transformation that takes place, as well as what happens when poetry is translated into film, because Vera now is writing the scripts for her films, which is quite fascinating. So let's go and visit with her.
Let's go on to the next step.
So may we see Vera at home. We are at home with Vera Zubarev, poet, filmmaker, university lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania, and we are going to have a conversation about angels and 4 funny families. You were in the Ukraine this summer, and the Academy Award in the Ukraine.
Yes.
Can you tell us about your trip?
Yes, I was invited this summer to Odessa because they had a big international book fair in Odessa, and they mainly invited me because of the book that was published last year in Switzerland. The book was about angels, so they invited me to Ukraine in this August. I've been there for 10 days, and the book received 3 diplomas. One is mine, the other one is for the translator, because the book was published in Russian and German. It was a German translation of the book. And the third one was for the, I show this, for the design. The design was made by the publisher. He has a very good taste, as you can see. The publisher publishes classical Russian poetry, Russian literature in translation, and he decided to publish this book as a bilingual edition in Russian and English. And the graphics, they used graphics by Ernst Nesvestney, a very famous Russian sculptor. And also the book received this award, the top book, and top is in Russian they use the same word as you use in English, top, T-O-P. So top kniga, top book. It was
Seriously?
It was very, very, very funny. I didn't expect it myself when they said top in English, actually. So
Extraordinary. It's a beautiful book, and Verlag is a wonderful publisher. Can you tell us a little bit about Angels?
it was a professor from Heidelberg who read this book in Russian, and he decided that why not to translate it into German. And he told me I would probably find a very good and very smart translator for these poems, because the poems are like half jocular, like humorous poetry combined with some philosophy. It's not angelic literature. It has nothing to do with religion at all. It has some other ideas, maybe more philosophical ideas, more general ideas. As my publisher in Pano Verlag said, it's not about angels, but this book is mainly about human beings.
You have another version of the book, which is in English, which has been published in America, right?
Yes. First, About Angels was written in Russian originally. Then, as I said, it was translated by Francis Laird. It was translated into English, and it was published in Russia. Then I decided to write two additional parts about God and about poetry. But for some reason I did it in English, because probably the language influenced me and determined me, so I couldn't do anything about it, or just God told me to do it in English, so I did it. And when I finished about God and about poetry in English, I decided why not to rewrite, not to translate, because I can't translate my poetry. I keep the same ideas, I keep the same images, but it's impossible for me to translate. You may find some lines here and there, but it's different. different. It's different music of language that is conveyed through poetry. So it's impossible for me to do that fine job that all translators do, and they know how to do it. So I just simply rewrote. Now About Angels, About God, About Poetry exists in English, and unfortunately About God and About Poetry, they do not exist in Russian. So after I finished this trilogy, I sent this manuscript to various publishers, and one of them, the Livingston Press, he just admired this work, and I sent it along with drawings and paintings by Irene Frankel.
They're extraordinary.
The editor just loved her her works there, and he said, yes, I feel that it's going to be a beautiful project. And that's how we started working on this book together, and I made some changes, and finally this book appeared in English too. So we have two versions of About Angels, About God, About Poetry.
We have a chance to hear a reading from Angels?
Yes, actually I invited one of my favorite actors, Michael Dura, who agreed to read some poems.
Wonderful.
About angels, creatures strictly obedient and strictly disobedient, about their way of living and way of thinking, about the problem of their duplication and attempts to generate the artificial angelic intellect from the imperfect human soul, and about Eve, her considerable role in Adam's development. Angels have one and the same dream. If you search them during their anabiosis, they dream of triangles, of Pythagorean theorem, since equality is their only focus. Angels are always politically correct. Among them, don't try to find anything eminent. The angel knows how to have its effect, and it's not in the clouds, though heavenly inhabitant. Angels are tougher than in paintings. Like soldiers are tougher than their portraits in the royal court. Angels have well-developed shoulders, and they move with the velocity of your posthumous thought. The fallen angel is the one who's lost control. Like a child who's tried not to look at candies, or a Marxist wandering in a shopping mall, being instructed but still not ready to face all the evil of the world so close. The most restricted yield easier to temptation, but this must never be open to those who are not pure-blooded angels. The creation of man is explained by the fact that God was striving to extend variety. The identity of angels seriously weighed upon God, who realized he would hardly get anything creative from that pair of wings. So God started his new project, convincing himself that God always wins. He created Adam, who became the object of God's new experiments. God made Adam from clay, expecting from him more than the angelic submission. All in vain. Adam was obedient in every way. He didn't understand what was his mission. The fallen angel works with an individual, unlike the unfallen, who appeals to a collective. It uses all modern means, audible and visual, and it's very selective. The fallen angel achieves the heights in its base profession. Any psychoanalyst could only dream of achieving such results. It promises an invigorating oasis to one's curiosity, unslaked. It remembers its own first passion that could not be extinguished by a whole lake until its wings got ashen.
And when did you come to America?
In 1990. in January.
So a decade in
Yes,
America.
yes.
So it's
yes.
a wonderful celebration
It's
for
a
you.
wonderful celebration, yes.
And you completed a dissertation at the University of Pennsylvania, and you continue on at the University of Pennsylvania teaching there.
Yes, I continue teaching there, and I teach my courses on Chekov, my favorite Russian writer, and some other courses which deal with decision making, fate and chance, and organizational problems in literature and film. So that's what I like to do.
And you were recently at a conference focusing on Chekov, in which you have, I understand, a film that won an award here in Philadelphia for Funny Families based on Chekhovian plays.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We've made a movie. We started it a few years ago. It was based on Chekov's 4 major plays: Uncle Vanya, Three Sisters, The Cherry Orchard, and The Seagull. So I combined all of them together, and I called them 4 Funny Families. And it's kind of it's an interpretation of what Chekhov done, because he insisted that he created comedies and they're mainly staged as dramas or melodramas. So I tried to find that comedic notion of his 4 plays. So, and we made this movie, and it was also awarded for Fresh Frame contest in Philadelphia last year, and this year it's completely done. I made some revisions, and now it's playing on DUTV, and we're sending it to film festivals.
So it's the wonderful counterpoise to an earlier study that you did on Chekov, systematic for your dissertation?
Yes. Actually, my master's, I would say, in Russian was dedicated to Chekov and to his plays. And here, my PhD, my diploma and my PhD also, they were focused on Chekov's plays, his Seagull, and I also published 2 books on Chekov's plays. And the recent one was in 2002.
So in America, most of our famous writers claim Chekov is one of their favorite writers. And Chekov's plays are very dearly loved. So you've touched on an author that is very universal and appealing to Americans as well as to Russians. So we're delighted to have had this time with you, Vera. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So
now we're going to go to some more poetry.
yes, there are a couple of poems which were omitted, which I would like to share with you and our audience. One is called The Uselessness of Poetry, which gives us some insight into a definition in the text.
Just as before, but I think we forgot to say, these are very short little poems, right?
Well,
I mean, which is nothing. It's just that, in a way, I want our audience to listen more closely to it, so that they haven't heard it and it's past them, because it was so short. And the element is by concentrating on the.
well, if our audience wants to hear the poems again, the books are available. About angels, about God, about poetry. This is the English edition. It's published by Livingston Press. And the poem which I would like to read is called The Uselessness of Poetry. Poetry is the most useless thing. No one knows how to adapt it. To formalize its features is to receive one wing, and watching Pegasus feel always handicapped. Poetry has no specific goal. It craves non-programmatic development. In society, its questionable role makes it a disturbing element. To be happy, one must not strive to comprehend 3 things: how to win the lottery, how to find the meaning of life, and how to enjoy poetry. And the other, which has a Thanksgiving Day message in it, is some thoughts and suggestions to poets, if there are poets in our audience. If you are born to win the admiration of thousands upon thousands, as you concluded when you rhymed your first lines, you must be told that you are not Barbra Streisand, and that the hall will be empty all the time. You'll enjoy, though considerably later, a small space with your devoted chair, the acoustics in your silent theater, and the sense of no one there. Daily life takes over everyone in this world. Even God couldn't avoid it. He started as a poet, but in getting old, he felt like eating every day, something homemade. The creation of Eden cost God a fortune, and it must be a good lesson for poets who will still carelessly search for a delicatessen. If you wear nimbus, don't crave the crown. Don't strive to be popular, like turkey on Thanksgiving. Always give your preferences to the noun through which the first thought of the word was conveyed. So, what Vera has to say about herself in concluding is this, as she ends her preface to the edition. Thus I have started my own writings, focusing first of all on that voice that carries one through the labyrinth of the human mind, both sparkling and limited, the mind that intrudes cosmos and analyzes divinities, but is still helpless before the mystery of anything generated from nothing. My pen name Ulia assists me in walking through that labyrinth, since it's derived from a Russian word, yulitka, which means snail, and a snail is a queen of all kinds of labyrinths and a goddess of our unconscious. And what this reference to snail evoked for me was another wonderful book that I've read this fall, which is W.S. Merwin's The Ends of the Earth. It's the most recent publication, and W.S. Merwin just received the Lanner Award for the poet in America for his lifetime achievement. He's in his 70s now. And this is his last group of essays. And he has an essay which I taught this last semester at the University of the Arts called Snail Song. And it's about snails that lived in Hawaii and sang a song and were inspiration for poets. And it accords somehow with Ulia's choice, or Vera Zubarev's choice of Ulia, which means snail, for her pseudonym. He tells us that Hawaiian land snails are small, elegant creatures endemic to the islands. He speaks of their regular stripes, their brilliant colors. Some are completely grass green, but this color disappears at death. It goes on and details much of the life on Maui, which is where he makes his home. And then at the very end of the essay, he comes back to the snails and he asks the question, and what of the land snails themselves, for whose song the places seem to have been named? What happened to them? Well, what happened is they introduced African snails, and the African snails were cannibals, and they ate the indigenous snails. And then the settlers brought in rats and feral pigs, and they finished the job, and what wasn't finished, the military accomplished, because they set fire to the valley and now have taken over the valley as a military practice site. So W.S. Merwin's essay is about redeeming with nostalgia the past and a time in which snail song could be uttered and heard, and was considered something magical in this valley. And he ends his essay, nobody seems to be sure any longer about why the area came to be called Kanekakapupu. What people once thought they heard the song of the land snails, which was what was connected with this mystical name on Maui, a biologist told me they were probably hearing something else. He suggested that perhaps it was crickets. According to legend, when people hear the singing, they were hearing spirits. It may be that they are hearing the stillness itself, of course, the silence of the ruin, without the snails any longer, and without promises. And I think in some way, both W.S. Merwin, Vera Zubarev as Ulia, and our two poets looking at Pompeii and medieval churches in search of angels are also restoring to us the spirit of those angels that people once looked to. And in that vein, I'd like to retrieve a thread of a woman, Akhmatovah, who certainly kept an angel with her to survive the period in which she lived and wrote poetry from it, in that there's a beautiful new series of songs called The Five Akhmatovah Songs that was written by John Taverner, the composer, who lives in London. And in the Shostakovich Festival, which was held at Bard College this summer, for the first time, these songs were sung. And by way of bridging from there to here, from the angels to poetry, this particular poem is entitled The Muse, and it's about the inspiration which poets and the rest of us look to